Hi everyone, I'm John Corbett, or as a lot of people know me, Corbettmaths, and welcome to episode 3 of the series of videos on lesson ideas. So in episode 1, we looked at the 1089 investigation and how it can be useful whenever you're teaching addition and subtraction. We looked in episode 2 at silent lessons, and I like to use that whenever I'm teaching negative indices or fractional indices. And today what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be covering exam question relay races. This has worked really well for me whenever I'm teaching any exam group preparing for upcoming exams. So whenever you're preparing for upcoming exams with your classes or your students at home, there will be different things that you may be doing with them. You may be doing lots and lots of past papers, and that'll be quite a big component of anyone's preparation for an exam, doing lots of past papers. And they might be done just in terms of going through the past paper and checking your answers as you go through. It might be done in exam conditions and so on. But sometimes whenever you're teaching in a class, you might be doing lots of past papers, and it just might be a bit monotonous, a bit boring, particularly if you finish the course quite early to give yourself a lot of time to do the past papers. It can just maybe just get a little bit boring doing lots and lots of past papers, a little bit dry doing that. So what I found to be a really good idea, and this was an idea that was shared with me whenever I first started teaching. There's a teacher called Tom, and he gave me this idea, and it's a fantastic idea. And it was an exam question relay race, okay? And I've done this activity a lot with my classes. So if I've got any class preparing for upcoming exams, I would tend to throw this activity in at least once or twice. And this works really well and just mixes up the revision a little bit. I've also done this activity whenever I've had the whole year group, whenever I've had a revision day with perhaps the whole of year 11, and I've had them in a sort of a hotel conference facility. I've had the whole year group with about 180 students at the time. And with those students, I've used this relay race as well, and it's worked really well. Obviously, with a few teachers helping me out at the same time. So this is an exam question relay race, and let me explain how I'd prepare for it and how I would carry it out in the classroom. So first of all, you want to choose loads of exam style questions. Now here I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's probably a good number of questions to use, but 9, 10 questions, something like that. You wouldn't want to have too few questions because obviously the students are going to be coming up and getting questions from you. You don't want to choose too many questions, like 20. That's going to be quite a, that's going to be too many. So perhaps maybe 10, 12, something like that in terms of would be a good number of questions. Then what you're going to do is you're going to consider how many students are taking part in this lesson. So if you've got a class of 30, I'd perhaps get them into 10 groups of 3, or maybe even groups of 4 with a few groups of 3, something like that, okay? So get them into groups, and I'd consider how many groups we would have. So if I was going to have 10 groups, what I would do is I'd print out 10 copies of each question. So I'd have 10 copies of question 1, all chopped up, 10 copies of question 2, all chopped up, 10 copies of question 3, and so on. So here I've got my 9 questions and I've got 10 copies of each of them. And I've made sure that each of the piles have got the number of groups that I want to split the class up into. If, for instance, whenever we have the 30 students, 3 students are off sick and I'm going to do 9 groups, what I probably would do is take one of the sheets away to leave me with 9 of each of the questions. The reason doing that is I can then see how the class are progressing through these questions quite nicely. Okay, so here we've got our 9 questions and we've got 10 copies of each of them, and I've got them all here lined up. Okay, and that's the lesson prepared in terms of my resources. Now, in terms of telling the class how we're going to do the activity, the first thing we would want to do is maybe consider the layout of the room and making sure that we've got them into 10 groups. If your tables can move in your classroom, perhaps make them into 10 little islands or 10 little groups where they can sort of sit around the table together. Or if you're going to do bigger groups, groups of 4, perhaps put the 2 tables together. So you want to make sure that the class is laid out in a way where the students can get up and come to you, okay? Because obviously it's a relay race. The race is more doing the questions, hopefully, than actually them running to you, but I'll talk more about that in a minute, okay? So first of all, make sure the room's all laid out for this. Then what you're going to do is, okay, you're going to explain to the class how it's going to work, okay? And this is how I would generally do it with the class, okay? So hi class, today we're going to be doing an exam question relay race. Now, first thing is you're in groups of 3. What I want you to do is to nominate one walker. Now, I'm changing the word from runner to walker because I don't want anyone running and tripping and getting hurt. So if you can have a walker nominated in each of your groups, so make sure there's one person who's going to be a walker in your group, okay? And make sure at each of your tables you've got all of you have got a pen, a pencil, ruler, calculator, and so on, okay? So that's sort of letting the class know what's going to happen. Now we're going to outline the activity to them. Okay, so class, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing our relay race. So whenever I say go, your walker is going to walk up to the front and I'm going to hand them all a question 1. So I've got my 10 copies of question 1, and whenever you all come up, I'm going to give you all a copy of that question. Okay, so then you'll bring the question back to your group and you'll do that question as fast as you can, obviously making sure you get it right, but do that question as fast as you can. Then whenever you think you've got the right answer, bring it up to me and I'll have a look at it and I'll decide whether it's right or whether it's wrong. And if you've got that question right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to scrumple up, I'm going to throw it up in the air, and I'll give you question 2. But if you don't have it right, what I'll do is I maybe give you a bit of a hint and I'll send you back to your group to fix it. Okay, and actually just to mention here that as well as preparing the questions, it can be quite useful to have the answers printed out as well. So make sure that you know what the answers are. So whenever they're coming up to you, you know with question one what you're expecting. Once you've marked one or two, by the time the 10th one comes up, you'll know all those answers off by heart anyway. Then going back to my explanation with the class, okay? Then what you're going to do is you're going to bring question 2 back to your group. You're going to do that as quick as you can. Whenever you think you've got it right, you're going to bring it up to me and I'll give you question 3 and so on. And then whenever we get to all the questions done in the first group that finishes, you're the winners, okay? And that's fantastic. You can go back to your group and celebrate. And then what we're going to do is we're going to carry on until the last group finishes. And the last group that finishes, well, maybe there's a bit of a forfeit. There's going to be loads of paper behind me. Perhaps the group that comes last can pick it up. Now, obviously, with your class, you can decide whether that's appropriate or not. Some of my classes, my year 11 classes, we've got quite a good rapport, and it just adds to a bit of fun in terms of, who's going to be the ones picking up the paper at the end. I generally help them out as well because I've kind of made the mess, but it's just sort of a bit of fun, and I make sure all those bits of paper go into the recycling bin. You can decide whether that's appropriate for your class or not, okay? So really, that's what the instructions are. They're going to come up, they're going to walk up, one walker is going to come up, they're going to take a question, bring it back to the group, do the question as quick as they can and bring it up to me. And that's it. So that's sort of the instructions. It's quite straightforward, really. They're going to come up, get a question, bring it back, do the question, come up. And it's always the walker that's walking up. If anyone does start running up, you sort of say, remember, walking. Okay, maybe even put a bit of a time penalty in for a bit of fun. If that group's winning by quite a long way, you might want to sort of give them the question quite slowly for running or something like that. Okay, so that's sort of the instructions of how it works. Then in terms of my experience in terms of the activity, when I say go, they'll obviously pile up. That's the hardest bit for you, is getting out those 10 questions to begin with. What you might actually want to do is actually put the 10 questions spread out at the front. And then whenever they come to you, say, okay, lift your question, they can all get it that way. Or you can sort of maybe, try and have 2 at a time or something like that. But that's actually the trickiest bit. Okay, then what happens is they bring them back to their group and they're working on that question. A couple of them will probably come up at the same time. You do need to check the answers very quickly because you don't want big queues running up. So if they've got it right, go, yep, fantastic, good, question 2. Okay, next one, yep, fantastic, crumple up, question 2. Next one, yep, fantastic, crumple up, question 3. You might get then a question 2 come back to you and you're like, yep, that's fantastic, question 3. You then might get another question 1 come to you, maybe if the group's working a bit slowly. So you need to make sure that you know which questions are which. It might even be useful if on the back of them you've got, Q1, Q2 written if you want to, or just have them lined up in order. That's normally what I would do, and you would then know it's the next question. Obviously with these pads, you'd have them face up so you can see which one they've just done and make sure you're giving them the next question. Okay. If they've got it wrong or if they're struggling, if they come up, then what you can do is give them a bit of a quick hint. If, for instance, there's a question perhaps on solving equations and they've had 4x minus 7 equals something or other, and they've then subtracted 7 from both sides, make sure just give them a bit of a hint and say, remember to get rid of the minus 7, we're going to do the inverse, which is add 7. And, give them a bit of a hint so then they can bring it back to the group, relate it to the group. Usually with 3 students who are working in a group, they can actually figure it out themselves anyway. And you've picked the questions. Now, in terms of the questions that you're picking, you're probably going to choose sort of some straightforward ones, perhaps adding fractions, mixed numbers, things like that. You're going to maybe choose some compound interest questions, straightforward ones like that. I might not choose questions perhaps where you're perhaps comparing box plots and things like that, because you might need to then read through and study the answer and think whether it's the right answer or not. So I would generally choose questions where I can quickly see if the answers are right or not. Obviously, you're going to come back to those comparing box plots later on with your other revision. But in terms of this relay race, I tend to choose questions where they can work on it, get it right, bring it up to you. But if it's something that's, maybe a 6-7 marker where it's a bit sort of more complex, it might be that, you keep it to the 3 or 4 mark questions, the 1, 2, 3, 4 mark questions rather than some of those real complicated ones. And that's it. So this activity has worked really, really well for me. One, in terms of my main priority with this activity is just making the revision a bit fun. We're doing loads of exam questions. They work in a group, so perhaps the students that are struggling with some topics might pick up from the ones that they're working with as well. Obviously, whenever you're explaining to the class, you do want them to work in groups, so make sure that everyone is taking part. That's why I sort of usually limit it to 2s or 3s in terms of the number of students. 3s works out quite well. So I found it works really well in terms of mixing up the revision, just sort of doing something a bit different. It's great in terms of putting it towards the end of a lesson, perhaps the last 20, 30 minutes of a revision lesson. So perhaps if you've covered a topic, you could even do these questions all on one topic. So perhaps if you're doing a revision lesson on compound interest, you might then have have, you do 30 minutes or 25 minutes on sort of going through what compound interest is, going through some questions, getting them to do some, and then doing the relay race at the end. So you could do 9 or 10 questions on the same topic, and that would work well as well. But I've used this a lot in terms of my classes, and I found it's been an absolutely fantastic activity in terms of doing a bit of revision. It's fun. All the paper goes flying up in the air. I'm quite dramatic whenever I'm doing it, so the paper students have to come up and pick it all up, and it's just a bit of fun. Also, what I find is that it works out quite well in bigger groups as well. So for instance, I have done this, as I said, at a hotel where we've had a large number of students. And actually I've had 2 tables. There's been myself on one side of the room, another teacher at the other side of the hall. And they, half of the students are going to one, half are going to the other. But obviously the group that wins, they win. And we sort of give them a prize. And then sort of the students that are last on their side of the rooms, and they pick up the paper if you want to do it like that as well. Okay. So this is just a fantastic lesson in terms of revision, just mixing it up a bit. And I've just found it's been really, really enjoyable, and the students have enjoyed it as well. And it just makes your revision just a bit more varied. And that's it. And I really hope you've enjoyed episode 3 of the Lesson Ideas videos. Cheers. Bye.